Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our February 8th, 2022 meeting of the Half Moon Bay Planning Commission. A couple items to go over before we officially get started. To let you know that we are broadcasting this meeting live on Comcast TV, local channel 27, and on Pacific Coast TV's website. We have a few people in the audience this evening, and maybe more as they're coming in. But to let you know that we do have the opportunity that you will have the opportunity to speak. We do have a general public comment section, as well as public comment in the specific items. The chair will open up those public comment items on the specific agenda. During those times, if you'd like to speak, please raise your icon hand, and we will assist in each person allowing them to speak. If you are on the telephone, please push *6 to mute and unmute yourself, or *9 to raise your hand and unraise your hand. Otherwise, tablets, computers, and iPhones do have the icon feature below that you can raise your virtual hand. We'll be given 3 minutes for each commenter, and there will be a timer that will show up on the screen. This afternoon, we did have some public comments, and Jill did email the Planning Commission this afternoon with the memo and the comment, and I've also posted on the agenda under correspondence, so you'll see that there. Thank you for your continued patience during our remote meetings, and I will now hand the meeting over to Chair Korn to officially start.
Thank you. Happy to open this meeting. City of Half Moon Bay Planning Commission for Tuesday, February 8th, 2022. If you could stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And that brings us to approval of minutes.
We could do roll call real quick, and then we can
roll call first, yeah. That brings us to roll call.
No problem. Commissioner Polgar?
Here.
Commissioner Reddick?
I am here.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Also here.
Vice Chair Hernandez?
I am present.
And Chair Gorn?
Here.
All commissioners are present this evening.
So that brings us to approval of minutes for January 25th, 2022. Is there any discussion of those minutes? No comments? Jimmy?
I think Commissioner
Benjamin?
No, I was just offering a motion to approve.
Okay.
I second the motion.
And a roll call?
Commissioner Polgar?
Yes.
Commissioner Reddick?
Yes.
Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez?
Yes.
And Chair Gore?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Through the chair.
Yes. Commissioner Vice Chair Hernandez.
Vice Chair, yeah.
There you go.
We have an item before us that I believe I'm going to have to recuse myself on. And I'd like to request that we cover the director's report, the Planning Commission communications earlier in the agenda, so that I can leave and if altogether. And if Commissioner Ruddick also chooses to, he could choose to leave as well, just so that I'm not a participant in the meeting that I'm going to be recused on anyway.
Yeah, I think that would be fine. I don't know if that's supposed to go after public comment or before. Anybody have a guidance on that?
Staff recommends you always take public comment as soon as you can in your meetings to proceed with that, and then we can go ahead and do the flipped agenda if you choose to.
No, that would be great. So this is the time then for anyone in the audience to comment about anything that's not on tonight's agenda. If you have anything that you want to talk about, raise your virtual hand and we'll get to that. Is there anybody?
I'm seeing none.
Okay, so we'll pass on that public comment for now. That would bring us to the director's report. Jill, is that you?
That is me. Thank you, Chair Gorn. Congratulations and nice to see you all. I have a very brief report tonight. I'm just getting back to work after a little time away. Quick agenda forecast. Your next meeting, you'll see the housing element annual progress report. This is something that you see every year at about this time. Following the Planning Commission's acknowledgement of the report, we also take it to City Council. The report is due to the State Department of Housing and Community Development by April 1st. So that is the roundup on that. Staff is also preparing a study session for you on parklets throughout downtown, and hopefully that will be ready for you February 22nd as well. In the meantime, we have been toiling away on the Measure D applications that came in. By January 31st is the cutoff. We received applications for 18 allocations within the downtown. That included 4 affordable units. There are adequate allocations to grant for those, so those are already in process. We received 43 applications for allocations outside of downtown, where 23 are available, and thus we are ranking them. And you will see those again this year. And we're targeting your second March meeting. Per city ordinance, they're due to you in April, but we are trying to burn them quickly. And there are quite a few things that have been going on and will continue to be moving forward with our city council. John Dowdy is here. He could speak to this, but last week city council did move forward with their first reading of the electrification ordinance. And we're hoping to have an update for you in this spring as you will start to be able to see how that filters through into projects. And John gave the thumbs up. He has agreed to provide that soon. And really all the rest that staff has tonight is we just really want to acknowledge Commissioner Polgar, and we respect and appreciate her decision, and just want to sincerely thank her for working with all of us, and in particular, the highlight on the local coastal land use plan and the countless hours that I know she spent, and she spent time explaining things to staff, to members of the public, to just really educating the community on all kinds of realms where she has so much depth in her work and personal background. And I'm really going to miss you, Sarah, but I'm excited to see you around town and continue to work with you in other ways. Staff, of course, we did not want this to look rough. We already went out for recruitment, not because of anything about not wanting to savor the last moments that we get with Sarah, but just because we're concerned about not having full coverage with the commission. We'll be able to give you an update at your next meeting on how that recruitment's going. I know there have already been some applications, and you have a lot of very interested and interesting community members who would like to serve with you. And so that's exciting, and we'll keep you posted on the next steps there. So Sarah, thank you. Staff is just sincerely really touched by having worked with you.
Thank you. And I miss getting to work with all of you. I think I said the last meeting, but I know you weren't there, but I'm grateful for just the exceptional staff and getting to work with the fellow commissioners. So I will miss you all, but I'll still be here. I'm around. So, and so thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Well, and that's good news about getting a couple applications as well. So that's great. Do any of the other planning commissioners have anything that they want to say or announce? Communicate. Rick, Vice Chair Hernandez.
Commissioner Polgar, we will miss you, and we're sad to see you go. You've set a standard. You've raised the bar for what a planning commissioner can contribute to these meetings, and we hope the next planning commissioner rises to that bar. So thank you for your work. And Jill, welcome back. It's good to see you, and we're glad you're recovering well.
So I will close the Planning Commission communications, and that will bring us to our first and only agenda item.
So just note that Commissioner Reddick's leaving, and so is Vice Chair.
Yeah, through the chair, I'll recuse myself at this point and leave the meeting.
Likewise, per our last meeting, I will also recuse myself and I will leave the meeting. Thank you.
Through the chair, before they take off, do they need to say something about why for the record, or have we done that once and that was enough?
No, we did that once, and this is just a continuation of that meeting.
All
So
good. Thank you.
We're good.
Have a nice evening, guys.
And through the chair,
Yes.
if I may, I thought it might be helpful just for the public in attendance to remind everyone that we had 3 planning commissioners on this public hearing item when it first came before the Planning Commission who had conflicts of interest under the Political Reform Act. And so under that statute and the implementing regulations, in order to have a quorum to take an action on this item, we pulled a name out of the hat, and that name was Commissioner Polgar. And under the regulations, we get to keep Commissioner Polgar to maintain the quorum for as long as the item is still pending before us. So that's why, just as a brief legal explanation, Vice Chair Hernandez and Commissioner Ruddock are signing off now, and but we get to continue to have Commissioner Polgar here to make up the 3 commissioner quorum.
So then what's before us is an application for a coastal development permit and tree removal permit to allow construction of the Poplar Street traffic calming and safety project. So we can start with any clarifying questions, if anyone has that.
Chair, we are asking for an opportunity for presentation.
Sorry.
If we could, I think there's a lot of catching up we can do.
Right, I'm a little new at this.
No, I appreciate that.
Thanks very much.
Congratulations on your appointment.
Okay. Thank you, John. So, John Dowdy, presentation first.
Thank you. Thank you. And I truly want to
Okay, it looks like we're ready to go. You guys can, John, you're on. And we do have all the commissioners, or Commissioner Polgar is back, along with Commissioner Gorn and Commissioner Benjamin. So we're good.
All right, thank you. And we'll pick up. I will again say that one of the critical pieces is the implementation of through the master plans and other plans. Jonathan, next item. And these are just three of the, I think, more pertinent ones to this project. Obviously, the recently certified land use plan, the bicycle master plan, obviously the circulation element. So these all, I think, fit in neatly with various objectives and policies of those documents. Jonathan, next. So I don't think I have to spend much time on here other than to say, we've always sort of, while we've looked at Poplar Street as a singular corridor and looked at the improvements that are necessary to deal with that, from our conversations, our survey, all of our work, they're clearly sort of two distinct pieces of this, the piece that's east of Highway 1 and the piece that's west of Highway 1. And certainly our objective, and I think the community objective, is to link these and tie these together so they're not necessarily a completely distinctive experience, but recognizing that they were developed in slightly different scenarios and slightly different improvements from the very beginning, and kind of working through that. Next. So, and this is some of background from the last time, and I won't spend a lot of time, just to say that we have done over the last several years quite a bit of community outreach. The survey work was very helpful, but we've held various community meetings. And again, I believe that the December Planning Commission meeting was very informative and helpful to the cause. And and we continue to work through and listen. And I'm hopeful again tonight that the public comment will affirm a lot of the work that we've done and identify perhaps where we might have fallen a little short. Next. So again, a little recap on this. I try not to pay attention to next doors. There have been a few next door comments saying we're going to chop down the trees, we're going to chop down the cypress trees. I want to be clear, we're not chopping down the cypress trees. No, they are aging in place, and we have, and others have removed these, but at this point, there is no proposal. They are healthy, and we're thrilled with that because they really do create a unique environment out there along Poplar. Appreciate and enjoy that. Now we do have a request, and part of the project is the removal of these 6 London plane trees. They are aligned in kind of the wrong spot, regardless of what the improvements ultimately are. They are not really great quality street trees to begin with. You can see also they grow quite tall and will create a problem with those power lines. And frankly, they just are not in great shape. So that is part of it. And to be clear, there is that request as part of the actions to authorize their removal. And in return, there's 30 new street trees or so to be added. And we may even add additional as we look at and see fit out there, particularly if we expand some of the bulb outs and chicanes and things of that nature. And we also can talk a little bit about, we are looking for policy directions, whether there should be trees in the traffic circles or not. And I've heard comments both directions on that. So anything that you can give in terms of direction on that, and we'll talk about that a little later, would be helpful. And all things can be done. Next. So we have taken the opportunity since the December meeting to look at the minutes, to look at our notes, and to sharpen our pencils and pens, and to try to address the issues that were raised by commission members and the community. These are just a few of those, and rather than going through that point, I will just walk you through the changes in the plans themselves. I also note that there are revised and added conditions 15 through 19 that address a number of the issues that may not be clearly shown on the plans. And notably, I think there was a question about what happens with the vacant lands and the reimbursement agreement for up to the 6 parcels that are currently vacant on the east side of the highway that would run 10 years along and reimburse the city back for the frontage improvements. So I think that's an equity issue that's reasonable and consistent, and something that's used throughout the state to deal with those. Next. So I'm going to walk you through these streets, the plan views from west to east, because all of the views on the cross sections are east or west to east. So we'll just work our way back. So starting with Railroad Avenue. So you'll note, and you can't, unfortunately, you can't see the difference with this, but what I'll note is the beige colored area on these have been added, and what that represents is the retention of existing sort of native pervious area. Prior to this, there was some question about whether that was going to be paved out. There were variabilities in the plans and designs, and based on the comments and issues that came about, we have absolutely suggested that we retain these areas, and some improvement may be there just in terms of putting additional cleanup and everything. But for the most part, our objective is to try to leave existing landscaping in place and not mess with that, and to improve, again, pervious area and retain that, and from a stormwater perspective, help in the process of treatment. We continue to recommend a split of a decomposed granite path on the south side and a continuous sidewalk on the north side. And again, you can see now the difference between the white or the light shaded is existing, and the darker gray is new, and that's pointed out in one. You can also see that we have added in the high visibility crosswalks, which we think add safety for those crossing, and they're also more visible to the motorist as well. And we think that will particularly, since our plans are not to increase significantly lighting in these areas, so those will include some improvements in terms of for evening time and darker crossings. We've also tried to show where some of the existing trees are and the pop outs there. I will say this, and this will continue through the whole issue. We are the 5 foot or the 6 foot decomposed granite pathway is shown as a linear path. We recognize there are existing trees, there are existing situations out there that we may need to move around and deal with that. So our intention clearly, and for the record, is that where we need to jog and move it around a little bit, we will do so to preserve drip line and to preserve the obviously roots and such around. But for the sake of this, we're delineating that as a 6 foot path. But again, there are some things with that that we'll have to move around and deal with it. And in some circumstances, are noted in revised condition, we may have to narrow that down simply because there just isn't enough room where the trees exist. And so, but we will always be compliant with 80 provision with a minimum 30 inches. And we don't think we're ever going to have to get to that point, but just we may have to narrow a little bit in certain occasions to deal with field conditions. The other thing I'll note on this, and you'll see it consistently throughout, is we have shown on these plans the concrete driveway aprons, and those aprons would basically be in the place of the decomposed granite pathway, and they would provide a concrete path to travel up onto the driveways of each home. I believe there's 22 of these. We have provided a condition which suggests a opt-out provision. So we show it in, we account for the impervious area that reflects, and but we allow each property owner to opt out of having that concrete apron. Our request and our condition would be to reflect that if you opt out, you agree to basically maintain that section of the pathway so we can keep ADA compliant path of travel, and we don't have basically car, tire tracks and those things, deep ruts, not the track here and there, but deep ruts that would affect ADA compliance and everything like that. So that was the trade-off. We're open, and I've heard both sides of this issue. We have a revised condition. If you wish to go to an opt-in instead of an opt-out, we can replace that condition and show you what that would look like with the reverse of that, and remove them and have them opt in for the concrete as well. So we're open to the Planning Commission's thoughts on that. Next slide, please. So again, you have these in your packet. I don't want to, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. The same comments, frankly, are there with regard to the beige area and retaining the native. So you will not see those areas being paved. So in prior versions, there was some issues with the parking areas, and so those are out there. Again, you can see where we may have to jog around some of the existing trees that exist out there. And you can see also the provisions of these bioretention areas, particularly along the north side. And you can also see that First Avenue, you've got the traffic circle, traffic calming related to that as well. And then you also have these bulb outs and the green infrastructure that's there that also serve as traffic calming. Now, we have had conversations, and I know some community members have raised questions about the issue of what's happening on the north side, and should we pave out the parking along the north side west of Highway 1. So as it sits, you have the travel lanes are not changed. There's no capacity increases here. But you would, on the north side, under this current design, have the sidewalk, curb, gutter, pan, and then a pave out of the remainder area between the gutter pan and the path of travel. We have heard concerns about that, and we are open to offering a condition that would modify that to include a permeable surface instead of the AC pavement along that north area. And there's some variability because there's paved out areas where we wouldn't want to do that, but understand that where we have existing, even some landscape materials and permeable surfaces, that we would retain those to the extent we can, and look at basically gravel or other kind of permeable surfaces. Those wouldn't necessarily be fully permeable in all instances, but they certainly would be more permeable than AC, and they certainly would reduce the amount of storm runoff as a result of doing that. But we would not even suggest that that would be 100% reduction, but it would be some reduction if we went to something like that. So we are interested in the Commission's input, and obviously the community's input on that, and more And again, the continuation, I'll say the same here, is basically the continuation of those improvements, and the same issues there coming up from 2nd to 3rd Avenue, where we would suggest preserving. We have preserved the native area that's shown here on the beige on the north side, and we could continue to look at those issues with regard to a more permeable surface. The idea with that, in part, is what's been kind of conveyed by community members and some commissioners to us, is that that differential between the paved travelway pathway to the other material would basically act as a traffic calming to some extent. It would give a more rural feel and design to the project, and kind of hopefully, make it feel a little more like it is today, while still offering the same ADA improvements and safety improvements and traffic calming. I would be remiss as the Public Works Director to not say this. There's more work, there's more maintenance, and there's also different expectations from the neighbors when we do this. We would not be taking a street cleaner down the gutter pan to clean that if we have materials along there. So there becomes a little more responsibility on the part of the property owners adjacent to that to help us clean up a little bit, and also have their expectations a little lessened from the perspective of what you would see with a full paved and gutter pan kind of environment, where we would take the street cleaner right down there, and you would have a place right there to put your cans for trash day. Next. And then we get to the 3rd Avenue, and this reflects, basically remains pretty much the same. Again, the path of travel being the north side, and as indicated in the staff report, we are working with Caltrans on a separate project, and that would include adding a north crossing at Highway 1 as part of that project, and then extending that through. We are recommending and have included a condition which would include additional bulb outs, chicanes, bulb outs, whatever you wish to call them, at this location, roughly at this location, somewhere at this point in this section between the highway and 3rd Avenue, to try to slow folks down when they get there. And also it's a bit of an aesthetic issue, but primarily it's there for folks turning right or left in there. They tend to like to speed up, and then all of a sudden we kind of get to the traffic circle. So that would obviously provide an opportunity for folks to sort of recognize, hey, something's different here. You're slowing down and doing that. And this was not shown on these. We couldn't modify the plans at this point to deal with that, but we did include a condition which would require those, and we think that was a great addition. Next. This section shows the added bulb outs. We had a community member from located on the east side of this area who had raised concerns and legitimate concerns about the lack of traffic calming on the east side, and in response, we have modified the plans accordingly. So these include the bulb outs at the corners, and also an extension out on the south side as well. So that basically creates a narrowing. As indicated in the staff report, we did not include a traffic circle here, simply because we just didn't feel like there was adequate queuing area behind the Highway 1 intersection, and didn't want cars getting caught in this traffic circle. So this was the best solution that we could identify to meet those objectives and provide traffic calming, and also keep the flow moving there. Next. And then this is the best view, sort of looking at the broader perspective of the green infrastructure and treatment. And I believe it's condition 19 is really reflects this, but it also reflects other areas dealing with where can we add additional bio retention and bio swale and bio treatment. There are issues that we have to be considerate of, including that we cannot locate some of these things within 10 feet of an existing water line, a water main. So we're still working with the water district, but we know that and believe that we can integrate in greater retention and treatment throughout this section. And this is just this kind of the start of that work. And you can see also the bulb outs and the extensions of the bioretention there, again, really trying to create a reduced speed along here. Obviously, these do reduce down some of the parking, but I think from our staff's perspective, what we've heard from the community, they're willing to accept those trade-offs in this. And this is a primarily a residential area, and I think we're all familiar with the street parking is a little different in the residential areas, and can be accommodated. Next. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on these. They're in the packet, they're there. But I was pleased, thank you to my staff, Maz and Jonathan in particular, for getting these out and putting them out there, because I think one of the things that I've said in the staff report, I've said privately to each of you, and I'll say publicly, we didn't do as good a job as we could and should have leading into the December 14th meeting, of really being able to show what it is that we're proposing to do, what it would look like, and how this all sort of integrates with this. So I apologize again for that, and believe that these go a long way toward helping people understand. I'll point out on this, just if you look at the picture, you see this large cypress tree in front of it. This picture, basically the cross section is to the one on the left side and in the picture are on the north side. And so we didn't put the tree in the foreground because you couldn't see anything after that otherwise. So just pretend there is a big cypress in the foreground in front of that car on this. But you can see what we're talking about, which is retaining the existing permeable native material, not paving that out. It's used for parking today. It'll be used for parking in the future under this scenario. And again, our objective is to try to retain as much as the existing landscaping as we possible and leave this as untouched as we possibly can. And again, the DG path looks like a long straight linear path, but we know that we're going to have to move and jog it around based on site conditions that exist out there. And I do apologize. I know these houses do not look like your houses. They're much more beautiful out there with that, but this is the software we were stuck with. So bear with us. It looked worse, frankly, but we're in better shape here. Next. And I won't belabor this. This is just, again, another cross section. We can always come back if there are questions. But these just reflect moving again from west to east, looking up toward the hills in the east. Next. And this is a section we wanted to show of sort of what this would look like at the traffic circle. And again, we are very interested in your thoughts and whether you want to include condition yes or no with regard to the tree. Absent a condition, we will include tree in that roundabout. If there are concerns, issues, questions, you can certainly deal with that. But otherwise, you can see in this that we are looking at, again, the high visibility crosswalks. Those were added, again, as part of the comments and revision recommendations. May not been as specific, but really we saw the need to deal with this. And those would be the ladder kind of white ladder crosswalks that would provide much more visibility to everything with that. Next, please. Again, this is section as we head into the eastern section. And right now, this section includes the pavement to curb and basically a planted parkway. The parkways are there because you can see basically utilities and existing utilities. So we've struggled a little bit on how to design this. It might have been different if we weren't dealing with overhead utilities and lines that we couldn't underground financially with that. So we are trying to work with that. And frankly, we have heard questions. Could we have a DG path along the south side to connect in with the existing proposed DG path to the west? We're willing to propose a condition that would reflect that, if that is the desire of the commission to do so in the community. Again, our recommendations come around just a lot on maintenance perspective, and just also dealing with these. You have, I think, again, many lots, and Jonathan actually could probably text me the number, but there are many lots. We also will need to address the issue of the concrete apron there and whether that's an opt-in or opt-out scenario if you choose to go with the decomposed granite sidewalk. And again, I will say this, if it becomes a desire, both within the community and public comment and yours as the commission, we are willing to offer up the permeable surface instead of the new AC parking on each side of this. Again, for a lot of reasons, we would prefer that we retained these sections as they are, but we are open to that, and that would leave us again in more of a scenario in which you would have a defined AC travel lanes, and you would have something would look maybe similar to what you're seeing on that picture there on this deal, and then you would have the sidewalk, and on the other side you would have either the sidewalk, you'd have a planter area at the sidewalk, so it can work. And again, we're here to try to work with you. So 7 existing properties on the east, and then you've got the vacant parcels that obviously would have some kind of driveway crossings there. Thank you, Jonathan. And next. And this is just, again, more of a reflection up closer toward Main Street. And again, just want to say, one of the main tenets of this effort is to try to get a all-weather, even wet weather, paved concrete path of travel for the seniors, for the children, for everyone in the community, for visitors who want to walk down to Poplar. And while the DG path is going to be built as an ADA compliant pathway, the maintenance and the effort that it takes will be a lot, and it just makes for us a lot more sense to have both of those provisions as ADA compliant, but having one at least being that concrete compliant path of travel from Main Street, basically the senior village there, down to the crosswalk where you go onto the new parallel path that was put in recently. And Jonathan, great job on project managing that, his first project with us. Next. So I'm going to turn over for this section to Moz to just talk about green infrastructure and the stormwater runoff, and hopefully answer a lot of those questions that I know many of you have been asking and concerned about. So Moz, take it away.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone. So as part of the feedback that we received at the December meeting, you've seen the increase in the bioretention and permeable areas on the project plans. I'll share a little bit on the methodology we use to determine the volumes and help appropriately size the green infrastructure that we have on this project. Next slide, please. This is part of this was this spreadsheet is what is actually included in the communication that came out earlier before the meeting. It's more total form, but we've got it broken up here. So I'll go through it a little bit. We've utilized the combination flow and volume sizing methodology, which was approved by the California Water Board. This is what's been utilized in the region, and there are some specific factors that adjust to each project site location. So for San Mateo County, there are 7 regions identified with respective rainfall data. And there's and this value is then adjusted to reflect the microclimate that we have with a little bit more accuracy. So we fall under the rainfall region 3, and that our mean annual precipitation is about 25.9 inches. And with that, there's some adjustment factors there for the specific site. So we're looking at a factor of 1.08. And then from there, we calculated the overall project area for impervious surfaces. And you'll notice that we also have a little bit of pervious surface. And the reason for that is because although it's pervious, it is not 100% infiltratable. There is some resistance to that stormwater to infiltrate through. So there's a 10%, a 0.1 factor that's applied to that, whereas the impervious is just 100% impervious. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, so these are the 7 regions that it's broken up into, and 4. So we are in Region 3 in Half Moon Bay, and what we utilize here is from the DMA, which stands for the Drainage Management Area. Some of the initial estimates we utilized from this basically comes out to a required capture volume of 9,101 cubic feet. And so with that, we utilize some of the calculations here to come up with the overall design storm for the project. So the model utilizes a uniform rainfall intensity of 0.2 inches per hour. And by utilizing that and our MAP area, we come up with a rainfall duration event of 4.43. And with that, that's kind of our blueprint for what this site is required to hold. And that's what comes back with that 9,100 cubic feet of storage. From there, there's some basic calculations that this model outputs. There are some general factors that are used for sizing of stormwater retention areas. There's a very basic 4% rule that has been kind of used as a guideline, if you will, not really as a sizing tool, but more as a guideline to check and verify how the calculations are looking. And that's been generally a 4% rule. So for every project area that's impervious, a minimum of 4% of it should be pervious for treatment purposes. So we look at that more as kind of a check as we go through the calculations. Next slide, please. So now we're going to look a little bit more closely at the optimizing of the treatment measures. So what we did was basically for this project, we entered the amount of bioretention square footage that is proposed on the plans. It's about 10,000 square feet is what we've proposed. And so with that, the calculation provides a storage of 18,468 cubic feet of runoff. So overall, what does this mean? The system is designed to handle a much larger storm event than what the design is. And the design of 4-hour duration at that intensity falls in between the 10 to 25 year event, just for design purposes. But again, that 10 to 25 is different for every region. So that's why it's a little bit more subjective than that. But so that's kind of the way we've sized it. And so in certain areas, this tool is used to optimize those. So for some certain projects where you have limited real estate, this tool is used to kind of back into it. And it actually assumes that most projects are not going to be able to capture all of the stormwater runoff all at once. And so there actually is a ability to allow for some ponding. And generally the design criteria calls for 6 inches to be the maximum, which is kind of, which would be reflected here in item 6.3. For our design, if we went with the 4% rule, it would actually be 7.39. But given our project scope and the community desire and needs, we've over-designed the amount of square footage that we need. And so with the fact that we have that much volume in cubic feet, there would be, for the design storm, there would be no ponding that would be observed. And so we can play with this number a little bit, but we decided to kind of keep it at at what we're looking at trying to accomplish as part of the project. And so we're at the moment sticking to this 10,000 square foot Now, as we make these design changes, as John mentioned, the meandering paths and reduction of some of these other impervious surfaces, it's only going to reduce the amount of impervious surface, which basically would reduce the size requirement. So again, we would be oversized for the project site. So if we reduce the impervious surface, this calculation is still valid, and actually it would be more it would actually increase the redundancy of the system. And I think that's it for me. Is there, I think next slide, please. So I'll turn this back over to John, and yeah.
Thanks. Next slide. So, and Jill will certainly avail herself to you should you have questions and more detail on this, but clearly we have evaluated this project. Staff has evaluated this project. Brittany did before she left. And there are many policies that this, again, is being, having to comply with. This is just a list of some of those that are more pertinent to this, and the findings we believe can be made with regard to these policies. Next. So as I said at the beginning, our hope is that the commission and the community will see that the objectives of this project have been met, and that this is a good public benefit project. And from that perspective, from what we've presented to you and revisions, what we've identified as potential additional revisions to this project, we absolutely feel that all of these objectives have been met, and that we have retained context-sensitive street design. We have met safety needs. We have met ADA requirements. We've improved the stormwater situation in some regards, certainly from a treatment perspective, and we certainly are over-designing the capacity to retain runoff and to protect and to treat that. And certainly, I think from the Coastal Act provisions, we have clearly met those requirements. So we hope you agree, and through the process, we look forward to additional conversation and input, and hopefully, next slide. Hopefully a recommended motion, and next slide. And hopefully, again, that motion following the normal process for your hearings with that. And certainly we are here to answer any clarifying questions, or, and if there are none of those, we'll obviously stay tuned and try to respond to questions that are raised by both perhaps the public and from the commission.
Well, thank you, John. That's a lot of changes, and I really appreciate how many changes there are. I realize some of those changes are simplification changes, but I imagine that there will be some clarifying questions from the commissioners. Commissioner Benjamin.
Thank you.
Yours.
Okay, am I not muted? Everybody's pointing to their.
Are not muted.
We can hear you.
Okay, how unusual for me. So good evening, everybody, and John and Maz, thank you so much for the presentation. I can see a lot of work has been done here, and I'm grateful for it. One question I had was whether, if I heard correctly, John, there were some additional conditions that you were working on, but I haven't found them as I sort of leaf through the packet. Are there some things that we should be looking at that are not in front of us?
There are some revisions that are included in your packet, and notably the additional ones we referenced in the staff report.
Okay.
So were conditions 15 through 19. So you have those in the packet. we have done some work in anticipation of a potential, a few of the changes. And before the night is over, if you wish to even put on, just in terms of, in the context of a motion, what you're wishing to do, we can certainly work on the conditions and make those compliant. And frankly, based on that, so you won't see those. We can pop up a few of those if you want. We can certainly show a couple of the ones that we're dealing. One was reversing the opt-in versus the opt-out and we have a condition that we can show you.
I didn't mean that. Thank you for that. And
you won't see those. You won't see those in your packet.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah,
we'll just pop them up.
So can you tell me a little bit about how the work would be staged? Do you have a staging area in mind for this project?
Moz, I'm going to let you jump in on that one. I know that you were working with Brittany on that issue. So
yeah, we were looking at we were looking at basically utilizing the existing street right of way for the majority of our storage. If there's any large equipment, we don't anticipate any large stockpiles of materials, but if there's any large equipment that needs a home, we were thinking we would utilize our courtyard as needed. But for the most part, we were looking at just using the street right of way.
I see. Okay. So we're in clarifying questions, so I don't want my question to sound like a critique. It's really just trying to understand it a little better. So thank you so much for the calculation of the volume of water that needs to be retained. This is the first time, to my knowledge, I've ever seen one of these in a Half Moon Bay report. So you are to be commended for yeoman's work here. And because it's unfamiliar to me, I hope you'll bear with some of my questions. I looked at that helpful box that says this is from C3 section 5.1. So I went to the C3 guidebook, and what I saw was the calculation for the surface area of a bioswale. And there's a picture of a single large mass bioswale. And I'm not asking this question with any prejudice that I know the answer, but is there a difference between a 10,000 square foot single mass bioswale and a number of smaller areas that cumulatively reached 10,000 square feet in terms of their effectiveness as bioswale?
I would say it really depends on the conveyance system of the stormwater. So if it's one larger continuous bioswale, the challenge would be the overall size of the project, where that would kind of be laid down. So from that perspective, I would say that it's better to have it broken up and have it in different areas so that you can kind of think of each smaller area as its own little watershed, rather than trying to collect everything from the larger watershed, larger project area, and kind of confining it to one point. So I would say it's generally designed to be a little bit spread out from that perspective, because you want to be able to kind of try to localize it as much as possible, so that you don't have the stormwater taking a longer time on the conveyance to the proper location.
Okay, thank you. And again, just not to frost everybody, but I was looking at the final page of calculations, and there's a line 7-5 that is the depth of stored runoff in surface ponding area. And what we have is 11.24. And again, because I haven't looked at this document before, is that 11.24 a column of water above the ground? Is it in the ground? Is it a combination of groundwater and above the ground? What is that?
It would be, so that depth of stored runoff in surface ponding area it would be what's above the ground. But I know that you got it, just the spreadsheet today. So it's actually a negative number. So for us, because of based on our sizing, it actually should be not applicable, because there wouldn't be any ponding for the larger project area. There may still be some smaller ponding, but nothing as far as inches. You're talking about fractions of inches.
So the negative isn't a reference to groundwater or below grade or something like that.
No.
Okay. So the operative one for depth of runoff is more likely 6-3. That's the 7.39 that you mentioned in the talk. Is that right?
That would be if we stuck with the minimum requirement of 4,900 square feet based on our project size.
Which we are not. Okay, I understand.
So this tool is used a lot for private development as well. So what happens is a lot of times, again, for projects that have limited real estate, they try to size it to be as close to that design storm as possible. Our intent is different on this project.
I understand. Okay, I may have some other questions that I want to chew on, but I'll step back now that I've frosted you guys with spreadsheet kind of things and let somebody else go for a while. Thank you.
Commissioner Polgar.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. Yes, thank you, John and Maz, for the presentation. Really appreciate it. And you answered a lot. I had a list of clarifying questions and you answered a lot of them. There were a couple actually from some of the memo that we got that I would be interested to hear your thoughts on. And actually one of them comes back to the question, I think, and maybe Commissioner Benjamin, you might have asked this question. It was about the areas where that are proposed for kind of water retention for plantings, and that, like we were just talking about, and then how whether there's an issue in terms of the kind of subsurface, if it's like compacted or concrete, and I was wondering, how will you deal with areas where it is really compacted? Is there some sort of, will it be ripped up and treated so that the kind of like it's conditioned the soil to be able to support kind of the plantings, or kind of what's the plan there? Because I gather that might be an issue in some of the areas. Especially I gather on the south side where that green space is proposed, but also I see it on the north side too, maybe.
I can answer that one. So yeah, there is a very specific soil mix that's utilized for the bioretention. It's a mixture of sandy soils, so that it allows for additional infiltration. So we would be doing an amendment to the soil there. We would be removing some of the more compacted native material. And whether we amend it, once we sample it, we can figure out if we're going to amend it and repurpose it back in, or if it's going to be removed and replaced.
I'm sorry, I just swallowed wrong. That'll teach me for eating chocolate chips during a planning commission.
Here's to you, Sarah. I'm drinking a drink.
Sorry about that. Just so that was one question. And then another kind of question that I've gotten a lot, and I think we've talked about it, but I wanted to ask about this because this is, I don't think you touched upon it in the presentation, but there's a lot of questions that came up about contiguous, one consolidated path. I think that was also a question. And I didn't know if you had anything you wanted to provide any clarification on that, because what the constraints or opportunities are, because that's come up in the questions in the memo.
Thank you for asking that question. And we were able to go out and do some field confirmation on widths of existing sidewalk out there, and a little disappointed in the survey work, frankly, of what we had in place, and we're dealing with it. And thank you in the community for pointing it out. So we would definitely be looking at getting to a minimum 5-foot sidewalk wherever we are. So that means we may have to add width to existing sidewalks out there, and everywhere else we would be looking at. So our objective is to get to 5-foot clearance. And obviously Some of the sidewalks, a second sort of piece of that, some of the sidewalks are in not the best condition, and certainly we would be looking at taking those out and replacing sections of those where necessary to get the continuous and ADA compliant path of travel as well in that. But yes, thank you for mentioning that, because that was something that we did have a chance to look at. And our this plan and this project would be a 5-foot continuous sidewalk from Main Street to Railroad, and we will add additional areas necessary to meet that requirement.
Give me 1 minute just so that I'm clear. In your presentation, you said 6 feet, I believe.
6-foot DG path, 5-foot sidewalk. Sorry if I confused that. And much of the sidewalk existing is 5 feet, but there are some section of 4, and there is a section Moz went out and measured, and it actually comes in at 38 inches, I believe, and we're trying to figure out how we got a 38-inch under any standard, but the sins of our fathers, I don't know, but those all should be made to 5 feet, so we have a continuous 5-foot path to travel there. I hope that was part of what you were asking, maybe.
Yeah. Well, I'll let the other others speak, because I may have follow-up questions, but okay. Clarifying questions. But go ahead. Sorry.
Commissioner Benjamin, do you have any others? Another clarifying question? Go ahead.
You're muted, Jimmy. You're muted.
Unmute.
I do, Chair Gorham, but it's customary for you to get around unless you just want me to keep going. If my voice is that charming, let me know.
Feel free.
Okay. So I'll just touch briefly again on the drainage before we go any further. And what I infer from the worksheet, as I understand C3, it's a nice way of helping our communities in the Bay Area structure their thinking around how to achieve hydromodification improvements. And what I infer from this is that if we do this design, you are confident that we are meeting the requirements of the policy that says we're treating the 10-year storm according to our local coastal program policies, and that we are not adding to the volume of water in the Poplar Swale outside of the area as a result of the project. Am I understanding this right at the very high level?
You are, yes, that's correct.
Okay, that's extremely important. Thank you. Let's talk about trees. So I don't want to weigh in on your preferences yet, because we haven't had a public hearing. But I would like to ask about the kinds of trees that you are proposing that we put in, because there's a little bit of Brownian motion for what types of trees, and I don't know where we are right now. The last time I spoke, I thought, well, it would be nice to have them planted in cohorts. I actually made a big deal about that in one of the minutes. And then I got schooled by the community development director, as I so often am. And she rightfully so, that is not with sharpness at all. And she pointed out that there is mortality in trees. And the only one who schools me as often as that is Commissioner Colgar. I'll miss that. And those trees, some of them will die, and maybe they shouldn't be all different. Maybe there's something more appealing about a variety of trees. What is our tree plan at the moment for this area?
So we have included in an additional condition in there. It was added to the existing landscaping that would require the final landscape plan and the street tree plan to come back to CDD, to the Community Development Department for review and approval. And that would be based on recommendations from the landscape architect. Honestly, I'd like to reach out to Tom Conroy and those folks and get an idea what they think. I think your concerns about biodiversity are an important one. We don't want to see every single tree the same tree, because if the same beetle or comes out, regardless of age, if the same beetle comes out, we lose every bit of street tree around. So you need biodiversity, and also the sizing has to be right for the overhead utilities to try to accommodate those, and questions of whether we want springtime flowering or not, and things of that nature. So I think there's a lot of aesthetics that we need to deal with. Obviously, we want a tree that will not, to the extent possible, will abide by root barriers and go deep, and not pop up sidewalk and concrete as much as possible. Not go after underground utilities where possible. I know those are not absolutes. You cannot get a tree that doesn't do some of that, but there are better trees for that. Obviously, that we consider the canopy size and canopy width for both travel, parking, and for overhead utilities. And I think your ideas around biodiversity is important. And part of that comes around is that they may flower. For example, if we do flowering trees, they could flower weeks apart, and you have a continuous flowering down the street. If that's something that seems to work. So that is our plan right now, is to work with Jill and her team with the landscape architect to come up with that plan. And certainly, I think we're happy to report back to the commission on what that ultimately looks like, and then the community can hear that as well. But we want to work with you and certainly make those things right. We've been trying to get to we're at 65% design. We're trying to get there, and frankly, we just some of those details depend on how many trees we have and where they go, and whether they're going in a planted parkway, or they're going in a swale area, bioretention swale. So we have to look at those things too, because the bioretention swales can cause issues for trees. So we have to look at those if they go into a swale area, because of roots can rot from there if they're exposed too long to ponded water. So those are all the scenarios, and probably not all of them we'll look at, but many of the things that we're going to look at when it comes to street trees.
Yeah, and that you segued into my next question about vegetation, which was in the bioretention areas. I imagine that there's understory vegetation independently of those trees, wherever they are. And to the extent that we're probably picking vegetation that has good evapotranspiration of water, maybe trees that are good at that help. I don't know. I'm way out of my league here, but yeah. I'm trusting that the vegetation choices are in support of the water retention, effective filtration of pollutants.
Yep. Absolutely. So that's absolute. Yes.
Are those details also the kind of thing that works?
Those are the things that will be in the final landscape plans that will come forward to the community development director, and again, reportable back to the commission.
Yeah, I think the public will be really interested in like this calculation spreadsheet. This is an area where we can all learn together, and I hope that we do.
If I could, I'd just say that this sheet is done and used all the time by Moz and the staff to look at these things, deal with it. It's nice to unveil the pull back the curtains so you understand what we're doing. So when our staff comes sometimes to your commission meetings and says, yeah, we're comfortable with it, we are looking at and evaluating more than what it sometimes seems like with that. And so thank you for letting us take the time to pull the curtain back, and thank you, Moz, for showing the work and doing that work as well. So I think it's helpful, and I hope you appreciate it too.
I do, and I will catch my breath and let one of the other commissioners go in. Thank you.
So I do have many questions, but I would like to defer them because I'm really eager to get to public comment. I did have one thing that I really just don't understand,
Okay.
and that's this new opt-in or opt-out for the driveways that has just come before us. My question is really, so it's 22 driveways, and if, as neighbors do, talk to each other and decide that they're all going to do the same thing, if we get 22 driveways that all opt out of their driveway, does staff have concerns about what that would cause? What's at stake here for that issue?
Again, in the assuming an opt-out, well, let's forget the opt-in or opt-out. Assume that you don't have the concrete aprons and everybody agrees to that.
Exactly.
Obviously, there's a reduction in the impervious areas, and that only improves the issues there for runoff. So that's a net positive from that perspective. Our concern continues and always will be is the constant driving over those areas with the vehicle will ultimately result in compaction and likely some basically rutting that comes with that. And that's been our concern because that's the ADA path of travel. So again, our recommendation is that if folks don't want that, and again, you as the commission could just say tonight, so forget the opt-in, forget the opt-out. You can just say tonight, we just want the contiguous path of travel. The question there then lies is that if the opt-in, opt-out provided the opportunity to trade a little bit with that, which is to say, property owner, if you opt in or opt out, depending on which scenario you play, if you don't have the concrete, we want you to at least ensure and go out and just smooth it out a little bit so we don't have the ruts, we don't have ponding of water, and we have a reasonable ADA path of travel. And this kind of goes back to our rationale of why we wanted the two paths of travel. One, sidewalk concrete, where we wouldn't have pooling, we wouldn't have an easy regular maintenance on that 30-year life cycle versus probably every other year, a fairly significant work and add in the rutting and all those things where the driveways go. So that's where we were trying to approach is if we provided the option, then those folks, and obviously attached to any agreement that we have with them to maintain would be the ability for the city to basically say, hey, you're not maintaining it, and if with reasonable notice, do the work and charge them really a nominal fee for having to do that.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
So I don't want to cut off commissioners. Do you have any other clarifying questions before we go to public comment? Can we go? So I would like to open up the public comment session. I guess I do that, right? And let's hear from people, if that's okay with you. Bridget?
Yes, we have a few that are raising their hands. So let me over here. I don't have a name, but I have a phone number, so I'm going to let them speak. Last digits, I'm just letting them know, is 538. Allow you to speak. Phone number is 538.
Hi. Okay. I think that's me.
Yep, that's you.
Hey.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm Hillary, and I am a resident of Poplar Street, and I just had a few comments. I appreciate the improvement of this overall plan. It's definitely looking way better, so that's exciting. As someone who's spent so much time walking on our street over the last decade, plus I've spent a lot of time trying to make sure that no one gets killed. And I especially think that the part that you guys have designed on the east side of Poplar looks like it's going to be so much safer. And I really appreciate that. For the west side of Poplar, I just had a couple comments. First off, I think that, well, I mean, I guess I'll say that on the west side, I think that the plan would be better if we did one of two things, or both things. And the first one is if we make a decomposed granite path, you touched on this a little bit. I just think that it's really important that it meander more onto the street side and up here way less on the inside of the trees near the properties. And that is because I went out and tried to measure out a 6-foot path from the easement into the towards the street, and in at least 3 of the trees, you end up hitting your head on trees if you go the full 6 feet. And I just think that given how close that is to the trees, if there's also instances where you actually hit the tree. It just seems to me that it would be far better and better for traffic calming to put the path on the inside of the street, and it might pinch the street in a little bit so it's narrower, but that would result in slowing traffic, and it would mean that the path then would not trap the trees on these little islands where they're in between a path that also runs into the tree or right up against it. So there's like a walking or biking hazard if you're going fast, and then you potentially hit the tree. It would be fixed if the path were more on the street side. And this is especially the case between First Street and Second Street, because that's where most of those big trees are. Okay, that's the first thing. And I sent the commissioners actually some photographs of exactly what that looks like, because I just measured it all out because I was curious. It just seems not possible from looking at the maps, and sure enough, it was like definitely not ideal. The second thing is that I also feel like while I don't know necessarily who all the people are that will need to pay for all of these services, I do think that it's really important that the city is really being efficient with the money and trying to not over-engineer things out of respect for the costs that will be incurred by the city as well as by the individuals who have to pay more money to have this project done. And so it just struck me that if the city is going to have this curb and gutter path on the north side that's already 5 feet wide, that's an improvement in width to almost the entire path, because currently there's only a small section that I could find that was actually 5 feet wide, and everything is narrower or else just kind of this weird gravelly substance that is definitely over 5 feet wide, but not paved at all. But certainly it's not landscaped. And so it really made me wonder if a better plan would just be to focus on that sidewalk that the city has put on the north side, and potentially even just make it 6 feet wide, and then abandon the DG path at all on the north side. And so that way all the landscaping that's currently in place there would not need to be destroyed for the DG granite path. I mean, unless you guys moved it to the street side, in which case it's still way more expensive than just having the single sidewalk. And I feel like the sidewalk could.
Hillary, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're running over. Can you?
Okay, so I'm just about done. So basically, that's my point, is that if the sidewalk is going to be there, why can't it just function for all the purposes that you've described and be a path for people to walk on that's wide enough, and then not get into the extra cost and complexity of the DG path as well? I don't see why both are needed. So that is all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Through the chair, I just wanted to note for the record, I did receive those photographs from the commenter just now, and I shared them with you. There were 5 pictures, and I popped them into a PowerPoint. And while she was speaking, I know she's on the phone, so she might not have been able to see it. So the commission has seen those photos, and because they're in session, when I received them, I didn't just email them on. I didn't think the commission would be able to get to it. So they are in the record, and we can email them out.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. It was really helpful.
Okay. Good.
And Bridget.
All right, next we have is Lou Hodges.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, my name is Lo Hodges, and I am a Poplar resident on the east side. I'd like to thank you very much for the much improved plans regarding traffic calming on the east side of Poplar. It didn't go unnoticed, and it's hugely appreciated. I would like to speak out in favor of having a DG path on the south side of Poplar, if that is at all a possibility. I understand that ADA accessibility is paramount, but if it's possible, I would be in favor of that. And I am not in favor of paving the current parking that we have on the east side if it's not necessary. I think in not paving it, it will help keep some of the country aesthetic that folks have been talking about at this meeting. And I also think it'll help give the illusion that the road is narrower, which will add added traffic calming, which is my biggest concern with this project. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Looks like that's all we have for public comment. No one. Oh, I have one other hand. A moment. So next we have, and I'm gonna chop up his name again. I'm so sorry, but is it? Oh, Run. Okay. Hand is up. Clearly. Is it Ayad? Ayad, I don't know. I'm so sorry. He will clarify. Go ahead.
And can you start his clock again?
Yes, I will.
Thanks for trying for my name, Bridget. I appreciate it. So my name is Ayad. I'm a Poplar resident on the west side, and I spoke at the last meeting and I submitted comments this time. And again, I wanted to echo comments from other people that really appreciate the changes that were made. I definitely felt heard. So I've only got a couple items. I appreciated that there was an option to not pave more on the north side. And so I wanted to voice my support for keeping that as permeable as possible. The permeability isn't my main concern. I really feel like it will improve the aesthetics of the road, and I want to maintain the look of Poplar as much as possible. And so I appreciate that. The other thing that I heard that I really appreciated was that 6-foot DG path on the south side is one that had the option to jog, but I also heard that it could narrow. And so I'm hoping for a little bit of a clarification, because my concern is that I know that at least in front of my house, these big cypress trees don't grow straight up. They definitely grow out and at angles. And if you tried to put a 6-foot path on the house side of that tree, someone walking by or riding by would hit their head on it. And so and even narrowing it would probably not work. So having the ability to jog to the street side where possible is, I wanted to clarify that was the option as opposed to cutting off a structural part of the tree. And so I know that there's lots of kind of design considerations that happen as you go down the street, because it's about the only case this is there. And so I also wanted to make the offer that, and would appreciate if there's a way to engage with the community or the street members on some of those decisions, because we are living with it on a day-to-day basis. So thank you for again, I appreciate the changes and thought that went into this new proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have no one else I see that's raising their hand. Everyone a second, but I don't.
Let's give them a second. Is there anybody else who would like to comment on this issue? Anybody out there? Okay. So I'm going to close public comment and open this up for commissioner debate. Anybody have a comment?
Chair, I guess only from a procedure, sure. I don't know how you wish. We certainly could take just a stab at the public comment while it's right there, or we can wait to the end, and reflect it. It's your call. It will.
prefer to wait if that's okay with you.
Perfectly fine.
Because there's just so many issues here. And those, can we get to Commissioner Benjamin to start with, please? Thank you.
You're on mute.
Unmute.
It's what I do. I wanted to thank the speakers tonight and the letter writers and the speakers from the prior night. And now that we're beyond clarifying questions, it is only right to praise the revisions in the project from staff. I really appreciate the effort that went into getting the project as far as it was in December. And I even more appreciate the effort to react to the constructive feedback and receive it that way rather than as merely sharp criticism. That's not easy, and you are to be commended. I wanted, and also you mentioned that this was Jonathan's first project. I did not know that. He drew a really tough first assignment. So well done, Jonathan. In some of the cutaways, the cross sections, I think it must be said that it creates the impression that the right-of-way is further from some of the houses than it actually is. When I walked in that area, my impression was that sometimes the houses were really close. I mean, really close, like maybe 6 feet away or something like that. And that was what was represented to me when I engaged in conversation. And I think it's important, A, to acknowledge that if that's true, that's a real impact, having the community that close to your home. But B, also acknowledging that if that's the right-of-way, it's the city's right-of-way and the city is the project applicant. They get to make decisions about this. So I appreciate the balance and effort that went into that. And, if they're really that close, I think it's important to acknowledge that and say we understand that those are impacts. I'm interested in how we would react to Ayad's and Hillary's concern about the potential conflict between having a path that you can walk around the cypress and the possibility that the cypress would lose a limb or something like that. I realize that although these look like forever landmarks, they're living things. And, today they're alive and they're healthy. One day, maybe after we're all gone, I hope a long time from now, some of those limbs are going to look like widowmakers. And they're going to need to be treated like that. They're going to have to be removed. But in the meantime, we have some pretty healthy, pretty beautiful trees. I'm really interested in how we would manage that. I understood the idea of meandering towards the street, but I'm not sure there's room to meander towards the street and do the bioswales that are called for compatibility with drainage. And I wonder if there are thoughts from staff on that. Through the chair, I don't know if you want me to ask them now.
No, it seems to be a good time, John.
Sure, and for the most part, the bioswales are fairly limited. I'll say on the south side, there are obviously some bioswales in there, but for the most part, we are now looking at retaining the existing native material. Remember, before we were looking at some pave out of the parking pockets there. So we actually have quite a bit more room to work if the community is willing to accept that some of that path may go and encroach into what we've sort of identified as that beige area on the plan views or the native retained areas. So clearly, if I wasn't clear, we meant, yes, we would look at meandering, and that could mean both in or out toward the street or away from the street. And again, we just looking at where we might have constrictions and might have to narrow it to say 4 or 5 feet simply because it doesn't make sense. And clearly, this is in the public right of way. We will have to continue to look at and make sure that trees and limbs are not creating a hazard. There is nothing worse than having claims for folks that we could have addressed and fixed and dealt with. And that clearly is our responsibility. We are putting people in that path. We need to make sure it's a safe path of travel for those, whether they're on bikes. We know some people will be on bikes there, particularly probably younger, but some, of varying ages may be on there, but also for those walking, and some of those taller than me may have issues with clearances. So that's our obligation as the city, and we can do that. But we agree that nothing in this takes away from that, and certainly, before we're, get to the point of the end of this, we're certainly happy to particularly talk to those folks who are most impacted and share with them the kind of the final designs out there for that deal and work with folks on it. This isn't done in a vacuum, and we can certainly work and continue to talk to the neighbors out there. We always like to go out. And
I would, John, if I may add,
yeah.
I've put my contact information on the project website. We are taking appointments with anybody that wants to talk to us about the project, specifically about their frontage. So I do, I'll just mention it again. So yeah, if anybody in the public is interested to look and sit down with us directly and go through it, we're happy to set that time up and do that.
Thank you.
And I think you mentioned it, but I mean, it's been, this project at this point has become almost a parcel by parcel evaluation. It's not quite there, but at least a block by block is certainly, and it's something we're looking at. And I think that's, understood at this point, and it's going to be a lot of field work out there in the process.
Yeah, that segues to the next comment, which is, when you walk that area, it's really clear that there's, changes in setbacks and, the way that the area has been developed on a block by block basis. And so it makes sense to give it that block by block awareness that you've described. So I'm glad to hear it. You asked us for feedback on how we felt about trees in the traffic circles, if that's what we're calling them. I guess they're not really roundabouts. I don't know what the
they're really traffic circles.
Yeah. So for my 2 cents, I think they're, anything that's going to absorb more water and be beautiful is great, and trees can do both. I think the understory vegetation can also contribute to that. If it was like really bushy down low, there would be a visual impediment. So I noticed the picture you had a really skinny trunk in the visuals, a really skinny trunk in the visuals, going up to the sight line for a car or something. And that's fine with me if there are trees that can be designed that way. You can borrow some of the ones from the sand plant. They seem to do that.
I assure you it's not going to be an Italian cypress, which that tree might have looked like, or I kind of looked like a poplar tree to me. But if I could, one of the just on that comment, one of the alternatives that we've bounced around in our shop was the
we're losing you, John.
Art of public place sculptures or something in those areas. To actually, eventually, one of the alternatives to trees was to perhaps try to focus on maybe art and public place and interesting sculptures leading in those areas leading to the beach. Now I know that's a push out there with that, but it was something that we were talking just internally about and thinking, it can be really cool, but we also understand that probably the landscaping and the softer, more rural feel to that is probably where folks want to be in the community. But those are also possibilities way down the line.
I see. Okay, I'll hold up and catch my breath for now. Thank you. I do.
Through the chair, I do have my comments that I wanted to share, but you had mentioned you had a lot of questions, and so I thought maybe it'd be good to hear the clarifying questions if possible.
No, you can go ahead. Feel free.
Okay. All right. Well, kind of stepping back, I definitely talked to a lot of neighbors on the east and west side of Poplar, and walked, obviously examined the street, considered kind of how the proposed improvements will work, in real life. And I have to say, especially in terms of traffic calming, which I think is a really one of the biggest priorities for this project, and one of the things I had a lot of comments on, particularly on the east side. Previously, I'm very pleased and I heard from there's a comment from the person who lives on the east side. I think that the traffic bulb outs or chicanes, that's great. I'm still very happy with traffic circles. And I'm highly supportive of including, I think it's a condition in there, and you mentioned it, it's the chicanes in the first block between Highway 1 and 3rd Avenue. Very supportive of including that as well. Definitely like the high visibility crosswalks as well. As just another indicator that this is where people walk. So really supportive of that as well. And also very supportive of, as you mentioned, that not paving the parking areas on the south side of Poplar, leaving those native areas. And I feel very strongly that we should also not pave the other areas, as the commenters said, we heard from the public. So meaning including the north and south side of both west and east Poplar, wherever possible. I realize there's some exceptions we talked about, the connection to Highway 1, obviously but where unless it's absolutely necessary, just not paving it. And I really see this again as that keeping the perception of the road being narrower is helpful. And also that beach kind of rural aesthetic kind of that you have, it doesn't exist necessarily throughout Poplar, but it's definitely, there's a lot of sections. And I think again, and even some of the areas that would be currently proposed for being paved out, they're actually green, they're grassy, and so by keeping those areas, people park on them, so it's, but they have a feeling of being more rural. So for those reasons in particular, I also do think, even though it's very marginal improvement for permeability compared to paving, because a lot of these, especially in the areas where there are gravel, where it's very compacted, I definitely understand that those aren't tremendous permeable surfaces, but it is a little bit of an improvement to not pave them out. So I'm very supportive. I'd like to see a condition of approval along those lines to clarify that. That would be my preference. And then, and one of the things though that I did want to comment is I heard a lot of feedback on the width of the pedestrian walkways. And a lot of people asking why, let's have one kind of really good, wide path or whatever, a lot of concern about the width for the usability of the paths. So I was very pleased to hear that in your comments, and I know we discussed this, and I appreciated you coming back with clarifying that for the north side, that sidewalk would be even the existing parts that aren't at 5 feet would be retrofitted to be fit 5 feet. I think that's really important for that continuous ADA path. And along those lines, and I think we talked about this, I don't think there was any, objection to it, but recognizing that there are spots where it's not going to be necessarily a meandering path, but it needs to be able to adapt to the real live conditions, which are that you have some big trees where you're not going to be able to just cut on the house side, I guess I would say, of the tree, and without cutting right through the roots, because you're of course, and you've already proposed a little, this is an issue, obviously, the two really big trees, the one really big tree that's on the north side in the 300 block. But I think there's some others as well where you're going to have to be able to have it go around, and on the street side, have the sidewalk bump out on the street side to accommodate those trees, because if you were putting this 5 foot sidewalk, to avoid causing damage to the tree and provide safe access. Right now, there's some of the places where the sidewalk goes so close to the tree, people are in danger of actually whacking themselves. Also, there's some funky shaped trees out there, I have to say, on the north side. And so anyways, so I just want to clarify that also, I think I would like to see a condition of approval about maintaining that 5-foot width for the sidewalk and having the flexibility to bump out or whatever you need to do. And maybe it's put in DG around decomposed granite around some of those trees on the north side to make so that you could still have a 5-foot path, but also not damage the tree roots. John, I saw you raise your hand. Sorry. Did you want to reflect that before I go on?
I only wanted to just affirm that, yes, we can do that. And secondly, there are even areas now in the design that had a DG path that around the tree, even where we had the sidewalk, because we recognized that the trees were too, the drip lines and the roots and everything were just not going to allow for that tree to survive. And some of them went around the front, some of them went around the backside. So it's already acknowledged that there are site conditions that we're just going to have to work around. And it may be that we have to add a few more sections of DG where we would prefer not to, instead of continuous concrete around some of those larger existing trees, for example, primarily.
And then continuing, and sorry, Jimmy, if it's okay if I continue, because it's about the pedestrian. So on now kind of switching feedback to the decomposed granite path on the south side. First of all, I would, hearing that on the east side, there's support for having that on the east side of Poplar, the public comment about supporting having DG path. I like if we're going to have, I realize there's that section between third and the Highway 1 that isn't, but I like having as much as possible, having that whole south side, if you're going to put in a path, have it be DG. And again, I really, the key for what I'm hearing and what I see is like maintaining the width of the path, because that will make it the most usable. And like the 5-foot path having a 5-foot sidewalk on the north side, 2 people plus a dog can nicely walk. A 6-foot, I really think that like a 6-foot path for the DG is really good to just maintain that 6-foot and really make it as like usable, a really key component, like to improve usability. And along those lines, I really appreciate that you are, recognizing the need to meander it. And there's a few other thoughts I had on that is that one is that I'd like to include a condition of approval, because I didn't really see that that's in there as like something to essentially give staff, hey, kind of the impetus, but also the ability to do that. I'd like to see a condition of approval and to really maintain the width of the trail, minimize any chance of creating a hazard like the points that were made. And then also look for opportunities. There's a lot of good landscaping along the south side, for instance, and there's opportunities to keep, where there's possibilities of keeping some of that because that's already going to be green space. To a certain extent, that's less stuff that's going to have to be reestablished. And these are areas, obviously, that are already conducive to growing things. That's not growing in some of the areas that are graveled out. I get that. I'm just saying, like, take advantage of that. And the reason is not only is it less stuff for the city to have to plant, but also the more this project starts off looking good and functioning well, the better. It's just like, I really want it to have get off on the best possible foot, no pun intended when we're talking about paths, but I really think that's important. And then the other thing I was going to point out is that, I'm pointing this out because I think it's a benefit, is that to keep in mind that a lot of the reason why some of the trees are difficult to go around on the house side is that where compared to going on the street side, they've grown and been maintained to provide clearance for the emergency vehicles. So that's where they already have, there's already a lot of clearance. So you can also, but that's not necessarily true on the house side. So that's why you're going to, I looked and I was like, yeah, there's a lot of trees that are just I mean, the way they've grown is they've kind of angled in, or they have big limbs coming in and stuff like that. So you take advantage of, like, there's a lot of space on the street side of some of the trees. The other thing is that for all those people who still continue to walk down the middle of the street or down this, not on the paths, at least if it meanders out periodically, you might catch some of them. They're going to see a path, at least. They're more likely to jump on it or connect with it. So there's a variety of reasons why I think that's really important. And I appreciate your openness and proactively talking about that. I just also would like to see that as a condition of approval to accomplish those things, like keep maintaining the width, reducing the avoiding hazards, maintaining as much vegetation that's already in there, or landscaping as possible. So, and then the other things really quickly, trees in the traffic circles, I'm ambivalent. I don't know what to say. I like the view down the street. I also like trees. I thought that Commissioner Benjamin brought up some really good points about, like, maybe it should be tall and so that you can see still down the street. I also love, like, ceanothus, and I think that could be really nice, and it grows really well. I happen to know it grows really well, so maybe low shrub ceanothus would grow really well there. I don't have a clear answer. I also like art. So I don't have a good clear answer, sorry. In terms of the concrete aprons, I would prefer to have them have to opt in to have a concrete apron. I think if we're going to put in a DG path, but I realize that does, and I am fully supportive of the city saying, okay, but that means that they're going to, that they would, opt in to have a concrete, meaning that the default is that they would have DG, and the city saying, hey, listen, you got to do the maintenance on it. And they can always opt in to have concrete if they really are opposed to that. But having the default be a continuous path of DG, I would prefer. And then I already said I'm supportive of DG on the Poplar South side. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is that I raised a lot of concerns about bicycle safety in the previous meeting. And I think my biggest beef was basically there was a lot of paving going in without any clear benefit from that paving to bicycles. And so I think that if you really can maintain the widths of the paths, and I see that you put in the bicycle markings. I don't know what they're called, but I should know what they're called. But I appreciate that it's not possible to put in a separate bike lane, and I wouldn't expect that at all. So I want to acknowledge that I think you've done as much as you can, and I think that if you can maintain the widths of these paths, people are going to use them for bikes, especially kids, which is good, I think, actually. But again, maintain the widths without creating a collision hazard, things like that. I think you're doing as much as you can for bikes. It will improve bike safety. Those are my comments. Sorry to dump them all out. That as you know me, I'm from New Jersey. I go fast. Thank you.
Commissioner Benjamin, if it's okay with you, I'm just going to throw a couple of things out. Obviously, everyone is very impressed with the new version. This is a really difficult street because it's not just really narrow, but it kind of meanders, and that's part of its appeal. Like, it's really pretty, especially in the areas that are the most difficult to fix. So trying to add in traffic calming and ADA compliant path, and that's hard. So I think it's a really good idea to simplify, which is what you did, to basically focus on those two things. I was also I wanted more of a bike path. I wanted an independent bike path, but going down there and also looking at the plans, it's so clear that is just not possible to do given the width. So I think that this solution is by far the best solution. I think this is really good. I would say I remain, that's on the west side of the trees and the traffic circles. So I do have an opinion about those. And I think that would, I think trees in the traffic circles is asking for trouble. I think that it limits visibility. I think people would sort of sneak behind them, and that could create problems. I think that having a public art in those places is a signal to people driving down that road that, hey, this is something, nice to pay attention to and to like go slowly. It's like another clue, a visual clue to actually go slower rather than just have things that are, plants that are maybe a little more difficult to maintain by the city. So I would definitely opt for public art if that's a choice, over anything that limits visibility going down that hill. On the east side of Poplar, I remain concerned about the amount of asphalt that's there, and I think that solution of the decomposed gravel or whatever that DG path on the east side, on the southeast side of that would be a better option. I also think that right now that area on the east side is a little undeveloped, but that also is going to be the entrance to Half Moon Bay. Like when that hotel goes in there, when the bike paths are put in better, like that area is going to be prime real estate. That's going to be like what people see when they first come in. And personally, I don't really want people to see a street with two sidewalks on either side going down to Poplar and then, suddenly changing into a different landscape once you've crossed the highway. I think that having that all be sort of a contiguous look as well as pathway, I think is a really good idea. So I would definitely be in favor of that. I think that there's one problem that comes up with street calming, traffic calming, is that the streets nearby those streets end up not so calm. And so I would really like to see some kind of monitoring. I don't know how to do that over a year or two, and to have that be a condition of approval so that you just see sort of if that problem that's on Poplar ends up being one block over. Because, I kind of know anecdotally that's what a lot of people do, particularly locals, but also, visitors, is if they're stopped, they will try to go around. So I think that's kind of important. Also, that the stoplight at Poplar and Highway 1 is problematic. Like right now, it sort of feels unsafe. A lot of people sort of, if you're going, what is that, sort of westbound on Poplar and you're making the right onto Highway 1, everybody kind of slides onto that shoulder area that isn't really exactly paved right now. And so I personally see a lot of problems with that's not really related to this project, but that it's a Caltrans issue. And so I would just sort of say, when you're doing this project, to make sure that Caltrans is sort of coordinating with you and to fix that corner as part of this project, that'd be awesome. That'd be really good. So what else is on my list? Oh, so this, the condition of approval for the 5 feet, I think that's a really good idea. I think that there are places where it's not going to be 5 feet. And so we have to watch that a little bit, like the place where it's 38 inches. So maybe staff can comment on that a little bit. And I personally see, I understand the opt-in, opt-out is after talking to the residents. But I do see that over time, that's a difficult enforcement for the city to do, and seems like it would be kind of a headache for the city to always like be checking, are those driveways being maintained, and talking to the owners. And so mean, it's a little problematic to me. So I would like to be convinced that the opt-in or the opt-out is the right thing to do, rather than just requiring that people have those. Okay. That's it for me for now. Commissioner Benjamin.
Yeah, thank you. Am I not muted? Something's wrong. With respect to DG, I'll just point out, if it's of any comfort, David, that LCP policy 6-96 says we're supposed to maximize the amount of pervious surfaces in public areas. So we actually have a policy that can kind of nudge you towards the default of DG and opting for a concrete apron. On the other side, I'm fine. Your argument for the issues with trees, not a big deal. I heard Commissioner Polgar's comments about she likes to see the street, if I heard that right. The Ceanothus doesn't do well at my house because I'm near a riparian area, but it might be great in this location. Maybe I just had the wrong variety. As long, the thing that art won't do, the vegetation will do, is take up water. And that's a really big thing in this area. So art is subjective. Art is great if you like it. If it's next to your house and you don't like it, it's not going to be very much fun. But I'm okay with going to, lower sort of understory styles of vegetation. If the locals, if the residents want art and there's a gateway treatment at the exterior that could be reinforced some way with those things, as long as it's not to the exclusion of vegetation, that's fine too. I don't want to go down too far into those weeds. See what I did? To nail down those things. A question for staff. So you've convinced me with your worksheet and the conversations about how the bioretention areas work that we're gonna have a solution that really addresses the water. I'm so happy about that. I cannot tell you. I noticed that LCP policy 686 says, as a condition for permit approval, require ongoing application maintenance and monitoring as necessary for the effective operation of these BMPs. I would imagine the bioswales are that BMP here. And I'm wondering what monitoring looks like in this project. Can you advise?
I can take a stab at this, John. So for our green infrastructure, for the most part, we do annual inspections to see how they're doing, and we try to program in maintenance when available. But essentially, we'll look at the planting and ensure that that they're still alive. Sometimes we do have to replant, so doing that kind of thing for the annual basis, and then there's a larger maintenance aspect to bioretention, which is the looking at the amended soil. So I think about every 10 to 15 years, generally, that soil has to be remediated and looked at. So that's kind of what it would look like. It would be an annual inspection as part of our stormwater program, and then as we get to the end of the soil life, there's that piece.
So Moz, my recollection is we do an annual report to the water board.
Yeah, that's where it would be.
We can certainly make that available to the commission, and we can certainly add in our response to all the green infrastructure monitoring that we've done and deal with that. So we're happy to share that. With that.
And I'll add that for these green street projects, we do have a separate tracking mechanism required by the water board. So we do, as John mentioned, so essentially we will be tracking those and reporting inspections to the water board as well. So we can definitely make that available.
And I appreciate that. I'm with respect to its status as green things that are working and soil is absorbing. That's great. I was trying to understand whether effective operation in this case means that we're achieving our runoff control objectives. Is there some way that you would anticipate monitoring that?
Yeah, I think as far as the functionality of the bioretention, I think, for us, obviously the taking closer looks at the functionality after rain events, especially after the first rain event of a new infrastructure, is kind of the first piece to it, to see how it's overall functioning, confirming that our grades for the streets as we are repairing the street segment itself, making sure that the grades are appropriate and sloping to the right areas. So those are some of the things we'll do during construction. But long term, as far as the functionality of it, what we'll do is monitor it by visual inspection. And if we have ponding issues and things like that that pop up locally, we would take a closer look and address to see what the problem is in that particular location.
And I will say this, our maintenance folks are out. They're taking pictures. They're informing us even, in the middle of the night if things aren't working and dealing with that. And from that perspective, we're going to learn pretty quickly in the first storms what may need to be tweaked and improved and addressed with this. Design on the paper is great, or on computer is great. The field is a different world sometimes, and I think the only thing that we can say is that this is an iterative process. Green infrastructure is really pretty new, particularly when you're not talking about actually tanks and storage and things of that nature. When you're talking about open areas and trying to get water to move through it without moving through it too quickly. So I just suggest, one, I think there is a condition in the C1 that requires the monitoring, and I'd point you to that and see if that is adequate. But what I can tell you beyond that point is that all of these are iterative, and there's something that we will continue to look at, monitor, and suggest revisions to. And as important as anything is to make those revisions as we move forward in other projects that we learn from the things that didn't work as well, frankly. And that's I think the part of being a human being in this world is we think beyond just that day, and we look for improvements. But the good news is, I indicated in the staff report, we haven't seen significant issues out of this. Everybody in the community has indicated that they've never really seen flooding on Poplar. So I think everything that we've shown on this will be a net benefit to Poplar and to the community and to the environment.
Yeah, I would say maybe the first storm will be telling. The first storm after the ground is saturated will be more telling.
Yep.
And I appreciate the observation that we aren't getting much flooding. I think another aspect of the operation of runoff is to avoid erosion.
Yes.
And I want to be sure that we're capturing that insight, that we know, of course, there's water coming from outside the project area. We know there's a problem in this area. It's not a secret. And I appreciated the comments in the staff report that acknowledged that we needed to work on that. From my perspective, the correct operation, the successful operation aspect of that policy 686 is that we know we're not causing or contributing to that problem in this area. So that's really what I'm hoping we can observe in those. And
Commissioner Benjamin, as we said in the staff report, one of the good indicators will be what happens in the ditch along the pathway leading into Poplar Beach and the outfall. And for us, we're in there monitoring that regularly, at least annually. And we know what we're seeing and everything. And that will be the great indicator. As I also indicated, just a non-empirical, but the bottom line is that we have yet in the last 7 years to have to modify that ditch in any way, shape, or form to deal with runoff, and particularly to erosion, or to improve the flow line there. I can't say that with every ditch that we're working with, but that one I can say that. And so I think it's a good indicator right now that we're in good shape from an erosion and sediment loading, but it'll also be a great indicator that we need to work on things and fix some things and deal with that down the road if we do in fact have issues of some sedimentation that we didn't have prior. And that's part of our monitoring that we do as well.
Yeah, I'm with you on sedimentation. I do see some erosion issues at the very end down, on the west side of the coastal trail, and that's water that this area could contribute to. But I understand that within this narrower, more eastern project area, that's true. But we have that downstream criteria in our policies that we need to be monitoring as well. So thank you for that. Okay, no further comments, Chair Gorn. Thank you for the platform.
Thank you. And Commissioner Folgar, your hand's up.
Yes, thank you. So I had a couple of things just following on the conversation just now. If I heard kind of like, you can kind of adaptively manage, it sounds a little bit like if you did need to do something to kind of retain more water on site than you even, beyond, I completely understand it's well, over designed basically. Is there capacity if you ended up having found a problem where it wasn't working, you needed to do some additional kind of bioretention area or whatever? Is that even possible? Is that something? I'm not saying that we should include that. I'm just asking, how adaptive is it?
But we could increase volume by going deeper. So not increasing the surface square footage, but we could achieve additional volume by going deeper to a certain extent. Obviously, we can't go beyond the water table, but yeah, that's an option, and we can play with that a little bit. Okay.
I don't have anything to say to recommend a change or anything like that. I did want to clarify. Chair Gorn, I heard you mention the 5 foot and not being able to maintain that. But I really do think that that's maintainable, because I was referring, that's the sidewalk on the north side.
Gotcha.
And I definitely heard that, so I really do feel strongly about including that as a condition of approval for the maintaining the 5 foot, allowing bump outs if needed to, or whatever's necessary to kind of accommodate the trees, pedestrian safety, and keep the 5 foot. I realize that with a DG path, there's a little more wiggle room. I still think that maintaining the 6 foot is really important. So again, I think that you can do that again by you have a lot of flexibility with a DG path. So I just wanted to reiterate that. And then I know that I thought I heard one other question or comment. Sorry, did you have a question?
Well, I just wanted to clarify, we were looking at the plans, and we, with regard to east side of the highway, I think the intention would be to try to make a 6 foot, so it's the same width as what is on the west side. We think that we can squeeze it. It's going to be really close in there based on the property lines and the right-of-way line, but we're okay with the condition if you wish to expand that from a 5 foot sidewalk to a 6 foot DG path. Understand that it could be a few inches off just because of actual property, because we do have to continue and keep the green area there between the parking and that path area to address the overhead utilities in part, but also to provide street trees. So
yeah, I remember on the east side.
I just wanted to be clear on that. So
I remember on the east side, you explained that actually.
With a tape measure and yell at us about 2 inches.
No. That's not. No. I just wanted to clarify. And then two other things actually. So one was had to do with the driveway DG. So I did want to assure you that a lot of the driveway crossings are DG right now, basically. And they function just fine. There isn't a big problem with big ruts and things like that. They're actually pretty good. I totally see that, there's going to be maintenance. I will say that I did hear you say, John, it may be that even there's like the city charges a nominal fee to just do them all at once or something like that. I don't know if that's even possible, but I don't see that as a deal breaker in terms of it is. I do think it's important that it's memorial, that it has, that there's a requirement that the landowners be responsible for that. But I also don't see in a practical terms, like in real life, how it functions, it being a big problem. So if that helps make the case, the other thing, and then the last thing I want to bring up, which I feel a little bit bad bringing up at the end here, but, and I know I talked with you, John, a little bit, because I asked this question about the span on the south side between 3rd Avenue and Highway 1. Right now, that is, hey, that's a concrete sidewalk. So that's on the south side, which is the rest of that's proposed for DG with a couple exceptions. There's a little few spots where you're not quite, but that is that's the spot where I really wanted to see the bump outs in the middle, like the chicanes in the middle, because it's the spot where people, if they're coming east and they're heading towards Highway 1, they see the light turn green, they're like, gun it. And then if they're coming off of Highway 1, turning right from south or either way, coming off of Highway 1, they're like gunning it too. So it's the least safe. It's one of the least safe places to be walking and such. And unfortunately, on the south side, that sidewalk is super narrow. And so I wanted to put in I know you were not so like that wasn't so easy, but I do want to say I don't think that's definitely not a 5-foot sidewalk. And so what happens is I'm scared that people are just going to, like, in the most dangerous spot, they're going to be most likely to stay on the street. So I do, but I also think that putting the bump outs will help a lot with slowing traffic down, like making people have to pay attention instead of just gunning it. I appreciate that, but I just wanted to raise that.
If I could, we're going to present to you a condition that basically affirms that all sidewalk will be 5 feet, and even on that south side. So that would apply to that. So any of the existing sidewalks, we will look to make a minimum 5 feet, regardless of which side of the street they're on, to deal with it. So just to be clear on that, and I think. Chair Gorn, we absolutely agree that the intersection there at Highway 1 and Poplar has to be addressed. We got some, I would call them interim fixes and safety issues that improved it. But I venture and hazard a guess that's probably everyone on this other than maybe Winter, but even she might have been here long enough to have almost been killed somewhere at that intersection. So we are extremely concerned about it, and Moz is riding herd on the staff there, and they seem to be very open to making some fixes and deal with that. And we're also looking at other intersections too. So we will continue to keep you informed and also alert you when there's an opportunity to weigh in, perhaps as the commission even, or as individuals to Caltrans. And at this point, again, we're finding them very receptive, but there's still always a challenge, and there's always a money issue for everyone.
And Commissioner Polgar's bulb out. I'm sorry, not the bulb out. The opt-in, opt-out part of this, the driveways. Does that ring true for you? That's like she wanted your comment about it.
We're perfectly fine with the opt-in, and again, we can switch that condition, and if that's acceptable to all, that's perfectly fine. And frankly, back to what Commissioner Polgar was saying, we will have to go in there on a regular basis, compact, and bring in new DG to deal with the bird baths and the little areas and stuff. So the reality of it is, much of the time we'll be working in those driveway areas and working and dealing with that. It really becomes the issue is, I think for the most part, is just people occasionally going out and sort of, grading it out a little bit and making sure it's not a problem. And if someone brings in large trucks or whatever and really creates the ruts, that may be a situation in which we have to call them and say, you really need to fix that because that's a problem. everyday wear and tear from light duty cars and trucks are with the compaction and the base that we're using should not cause major issues for some time, but it will break down over time.
Great. That actually makes me feel a lot better about that. So thanks. I actually have one other thing that I need to bring up, but kind of got lost in the giving up my clarifying questions. Is when on the east side, when you look at the sort of the side view of it, what you see is sidewalk and street and sidewalk with a tiny little narrow strip of green. Mm-hmm. And particularly if you're going to go with the DG.
Hey, Jonathan, could you pop up that cross section? That'd be easier to work it from the cross section. Yeah. I think. For the east side, section 4 probably is the easiest one to take a look at, if you would.
Right, the east side on the south side.
Yeah, we'll show the cross section.
Yeah. So
we'll bring that up there. So
that skinny.
So that 4 foot
green space.
Yeah,
that's a very hopeful drawing with the trees there.
Yeah.
But I wondered, especially with the permeable surface, semi-permeable surface on this one side, maybe we could make that green barrier, or whatever, that green space, a little larger. Not so much on the sidewalk side,
yeah,
but on the DG side.
Well, let me first say, this was narrower, and we pushed it wider because my experience is 4 foot is an absolute minimum, and it will take for those street trees definitely the root barriers. It will take the structured soil to and everything to make that. I will point out that the tree wells at Mac Dutra particularly, those trees have just grown so well, and those are narrower than the 4 foot width, and those have become very wonderful trees. And the difference of why those look like they do and others don't is because they were planted correctly. They have root barriers which drive the roots deep into groundwater. They also have the structured soil that should have been and should be our standard for all street trees. So there is a way, and I assure you that these street trees will do better than other street trees you might experience with that. My concern is only that 8 foot is kind of a minimum point for parking. You could arguably maybe get it to 7, but you're also putting then the door swings and things out into there, and you're also getting the cars pretty close to already a pretty narrow travelway. If you note on the west side, it's 11-foot travelway. Here it's a 10.5 foot, so we're already down a little bit. So, and the only way that we could go the other way, which is to widen it the other direction, but that would potentially cut out then walkway and pathway. And I would only do that if we were going inland or away toward the south. I would only do it on the south recommendation with that, and we'd have to reduce down the DG path. So it's sort of squeeze the toothpaste. It's messy no matter what we do.
Well, that's so to me that looks like a very thin amount of fluoride there. So
yeah.
One option, one possibility is to lose double parking, to have parking on both sides. And I realize this is a parking area that's important not just for the residents, but for coastal access. And I realize what we're doing is we're establishing parking up here so that people can get access through Poplar. I would also say that that this is going to be sort of a signature area, and that the visual cues that you're walking into this beautiful Poplar area needs to start on that that east side. And so that's a little problematic for me. And I thought at first, you could just make that green area on that southeast side a little wider and go into the path. But I don't know if that's possible because then it becomes such a small path. But one solution would be to lose some or all of the asphalt on that.
Moz has his hand up, and he may have a thought on a solution here that neither of us have come up with.
We'll certainly take a closer look at it as we design it, but I just recognized a small mistake in this cross section. So when you add up the smaller widths in the bottom, it does not add to 60 feet. It's actually about 56 feet. So we have 4 feet to play with. That will address the 6 foot DG as well as adding more width to the planter. So apologies on that.
Okay, I should have done
get it wider.
I should have done the math.
I would, and I'm sure Jill is also, my minimum always had been 4, but optimally it was a minimum 5. So I definitely, it sounds like we can get to 5 plus a little bit there. That's 5 clear, including any curb line and everything like that. But we can get 5 clear plus get your 6 foot DG path if that is the desire of the commission.
All right, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, just for Commissioner Polgar, the moment I said the 5 foot, that we can't meet the 5 foot in the condition of approval, and I moved on to the next thing, I thought, oh no, that's not what she was talking about. So anyway, so I also had a question about all these conditions of approval. Do they all need to be, we seem to be reaching a kind of consensus here. So the public art in the bulb outs, the 5 foot pathway, the monitoring traffic over a couple of years, the opt-in, opt-out issue. Then there's one other one, which is, turning the asphalt into DG.
Yeah.
Those seem to be the things, right? Do we have to do conditions of approval for all of them? Is that?
Well, and I also had, there's a couple more in there that are, because there's the 5 foot, I don't think you mentioned actually the 5 foot sidewalk. Okay. Yeah. And then also for the DG path, that's a 6 foot meandering, and that the purpose of that is to avoid making a hazard, maintain the 6 foot. Yeah. And also to just, it's very important, I think, to get in there that's about also a lot, like leaving space for the trees. Like there's a lot of reasons to meander, and it may vary the reason why, like maintaining the existing vegetation, but to allow, I want that to be in that condition, that those are the variety of reasons that you want to, that will help determine where the meander could go.
Okay.
If I could say this, we can share with you, I think, our recommended drafts of those conditions. Jill and Moz have been working behind the scenes feverishly. Also, I would also point out that the record is the record, and clearly your direction is there. I know that's not, I'm not saying it replaces conditions, but I think in this instance, the record is abundantly clear, and for us to go back and for anybody else to affirm what we've done and dealt with it. But the conditions of approval, I think we can share and add those to that. And obviously,
thank you.
And Moz, we actually had the fully revised revised opt-in done previously with, I think, on the slide.
So John,
that was there, but it just reversed the opt-out to an opt-in, and then
John, can I? Oh, I'm muted.
Jump in, Jill.
Oh, I can. Okay, hi. So what I thought might help the commission is to make sure that we've covered the full scope of the potential added conditions that you might be considering in a motion. Noting that, as John was describing, he and our city engineer have drafted some of these in full, but not all of these things have come up with full drafting in advance. So I do want to make sure that we've captured the full scope. And then I also am not sure that we had consensus on one of these, which we'll find out with your motion, but we just want to make that clear. So first off was on the east side of Highway 1, we heard you say, don't pave the parking lane, use softscape, and don't use a concrete sidewalk, use DG. And widen the parkway landscape strips to 5 feet. They were shown as 4, and Moz just miraculously found 4 more feet of right-of-way width. So it appears there's room to do that. The next topic is about minimum pathway widths. So on the north side, where it would all be sidewalk, the minimum width would be 5 feet. And on the south side, where most of it is DG, it would be 6 feet. Although we acknowledge the block west of Highway 1, between 3rd and Highway 1, that is a sidewalk that was discussed and needed to make sure that it is at least 5 feet wide.
Through the chair, can I add one thing to that? I think a key thing about, a key thing about the meandering is that to avoid creating a hazard for the pedestrians and bicyclists. That's a big one. Yeah, I really want that to be clear, because I think that's a key reason, like why, because I see that being an issue for some of the trees, having gone out there and looked at all of them.
And maintaining the existing landscaping. Thanks for putting that in.
While Jill is working on that, I wanted to be clear, and one of the areas that I'm not sure where we have is the issue of the public art. Let me be clear through the chair and to the chair. We do not have funding in this for public art. And I understand. What we were suggesting is it's a possibility to look out there to see whether there are local artists or whatever, or whether there is the possibility of, with our public arts policy, to solicit and to look at that down the road. So it was more of an issue of down the road. What we would recommend at this point is, and suggest, is that if the trees are not, if you can find consensus on no tree, we would certainly do low maintenance landscaping in the circle. And that would provide us the opportunity to come back, talk to the arts folks, and see if there's the opportunity. And then the community can kind of decide whether it can embrace it, go around. Right. And for the most part, those will require coming back to the commission for some kind of action, if in fact we find that. So that would be our recommendation, is to remove the trees from there. I know Commissioner Benjamin may have a different perspective. I don't think much water is being addressed within this, because you've got the traffic circle is elevated up from that point, so it's really not getting storm water and everything. So I'm not. I think you could certainly say that those trees are not going to have a lot of bearing on the stormwater.
From the commissioners, I mean, Commissioner Polgar has her hand up. Can we go to her first about this? Thank you. Oh, it's down now. Well, I still want you to weigh in. Commissioner Benjamin.
Are you sure?
Go ahead.
Thanks. So I'm fine with no trees. My cautionary note about art was just its subjective nature. Dave, you've been around long enough to have gone through the whole pumpkin farmer art thing at the corner, so you know how that drama can play out. In the meantime, some low vegetation is great. I'm fine with that. I do not feel strongly enough about trees. If it were my neighborhood, I might feel differently, but if I would defer very much to your view and Sarah's view of this.
And what is Sarah's view?
I agree. I think that that having the low vegetation is fine, and I like that you allowing the opportunity in the future to do art, but not necessarily as part of this project. Like, I don't see the low vegetation precluding that, And I think it makes a lot of sense. I do think that the street looks really cool when you look down it. So if you don't have a tree, like I love trees, obviously, but it would probably block the view. And I also heard your points, Chair Gorn, about the kind of the site view, and it could be a safety, potentially a safety issue. So I'm supportive of this.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So does staff have clarity on, does this?
Well, I had one more, sorry, through the chair.
Please.
So one other thing that I haven't seen, sorry, I know the screen's moving around a little, but I saw that there was the inclusion of the condition for not paving the parking areas on the east side, but I wanted to see that be a condition of approval for the west side as well, because there's portions that are now going to be paved up to the current in the existing plan. So I just wanted to make that a condition of approval for basically the entire stretch, north and south.
We have an actual condition that we can show you. That is one that we worked on prior to meeting and everything. We didn't pop it on there, but we understand that fully and agree.
So hold on, did you?
So what's your concern about it, though? Can you tell me your concern about it?
Whose concern? Mine?
The staff's concern about.
No, we have no concern about it.
Okay. All right.
So I don't have this quite right, and I just want to make sure you are we'll see in your motion for consensus. This condition is focused east of Highway 1. What I think I heard Commissioner Polgar say is that for both sides of the project area, both east.
What Jill?
It's the north side of the
on the north side. We committed to looking at the variability there because there are varying conditions, but where not existing today, the paved parking that we would allow, the existing conditions to remain and or basically continue with a permeable surface. Pervious surface, whatever you want to call it, in that location rather than AC paving,
I think it's just a matter of saying it the same way you did for this east side. But for west side, that's all. Because you already have, like on the south side, you're not paving.
The only reason that I wanted to maybe state it slightly differently is that you were pointed out, appropriately, that there were some areas of green that we wouldn't really want to do that with and even come in and grade it out and put in this permeable surface. So it's also retaining where possible existing green and permeable areas. So that was the only difference I was suggesting is catching that as well with that.
So I'm sorry, I just need to be clear. On the east side of Highway 1,
you're good there.
is that correct? On the west side of Highway 1?
On the north side.
It's both sides.
We're not currently paved. We're parking. The on-street parking is not currently paved. We will use softscape in that area on the parking area. No AC is what we're really all saying.
I have a very inconvenient request, but could we do a 5-minute bathroom break?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I know now is not the time, but.
No, now it's not the time, but we can take a 5-minute break. Do we have to vote on it?
I can make it a few more minutes.
Well, we're almost done, but you know how planning commissions go.
I'll wait. I can make it like 5-10 more minutes, but that's about it.
I don't know. That's a lot of pressure on us. I'm happy to take a 5-minute break. Do we need to vote on it?
No objection. This shouldn't be rushed.
Okay. So it's almost 10 o'clock now. At 10:05, we will come back.
Could you pop up the hydro? Oh, there it is. Second bullet. Is there another hydro condition?
let's get back to that at 10:05.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'll leave it up. You can look.
Thank you. Can't do anything without Bridget.
You say her name 3 times. I bet she does that all regularly.
I haven't left. I've been here the whole time, just sitting here waiting.
Lurking.
Lurking. Those Zoomers.
Can you pop up that hydrology condition again, please? When Jill gets back from the single text.
Jill will be able to pull it up.
Yeah, so are you back together?
So we are back. We're waiting to, we wanted to pull up the hydrology.
John and Maz and Jonathan have actually drafted detailed conditions for most of what we were just looking at. They did not have, I don't see any edits. You have a condition, a hydrology condition, condition C1.
Yeah, I'm looking. Am I on mute through the chair?
No, we can hear you.
Go ahead.
Am I good, David?
Yes, of course.
Thank you. So I just want to align it with LCP policy 685 with respect to performance. This is part D where it talks about if any portion of the runoff cannot be retained on site. You know, if we get, so the section we had about periodic maintenance, I want to tie it to a standard of performance that I didn't see in C1. Maybe I'm not reading it well.
That is very helpful. We weren't sure how you wanted it revised. So I'm going to look to the city engineer to probably do an edit on that, but it's a, let me go back. I'm sorry, I have like 3 things on my screen here and I can't
You're multitasking.
up with you. Yeah.
I have no idea how you do it.
You do.
So when we left for the break, there was a section where you were talking about reporting out on the effectiveness. Thank you. Monitoring, reporting, and maintenance. And it's C1 does talk about keeping up, and tying into that is good. But I'm trying to link it to the evidence in support of the findings of consistency with policy 685, which talks about adapting if things aren't going well. So the idea is to look, you know, I'm not putting words in an engineer's skills as Maz here, but the essence I'm trying for is, you know, once the ground is saturated, we look and see how the design storm is doing. And if we get a bigger storm, you know, he knows how to adopt out to get, you know, he knows the cue, so he knows how to bring it down to the design storm. And we can see whether it's doing well or not. That's what I'm trying for.
So one approach to that, Jill, would be it's monitoring, reporting, maintenance, and retrofitting as necessary is sort of the idea. I think at least that's what I'm hearing from Commissioner Benjamin is the idea that there is an action that is that comes based on the monitoring, reporting, and just regular maintenance. That there's a need that there's also an action that is retrofitting, and you know, and doing that. Is that starting to get to your? There's an action beyond just monitoring.
Yeah, you have hit the bullseye, sir.
Okay.
You know, at some point, if we can achieve the disentrainment, that would be a brilliant enhancement, but that's not here today.
Okay.
We can also tie in language referencing our annual stormwater reporting as well, since we will be doing that.
Lovely.
Yep.
Thank you.
Keep clicking on the screen, trying to switch to
Yeah,
the page. And I was like, wait, why is it not working?
I want to scroll up.
I do the same thing.
Here.
Like, why is it moving?
So John, just let us,
There's more there.
if you want to show the
I would, Joe, just
specific.
continue. Joe, why don't you just continue to walk through to make sure we
Okay.
capture the concepts.
All right.
And we can kind of work. If the concepts are there, I think we can move forward
thank
and we
you.
have the conditions that we can attach to it.
I think you set me straight on this first one. The second one, we've added the hazard condition clause. Here's the opt-in, and they do have detailed drafting on that. Maintaining existing landscaping along property frontages where possible. This was a preference that we heard discussed. It might not be possible in every case, but it's certainly desirable and feasible in some instances. So we're happy to put that in, but we don't want to make it too hard, is our recommendation. This is, there are two monitoring conditions. This one is about traffic patterns. I would suggest traffic volumes and speeds on Poplar as well as adjacent streets, just to confirm that the traffic calming is not having, not rerouting traffic in a way that we're not anticipating from this project. To that end, we don't expect this project to cause that, especially for visitors. But
I would only suggest that at least we start with the two is it Metzger and what's the other direction there? The
Grove
north side. I can't. Is that Grove? That we start with Metzger and Grove, and if necessary, we can expand beyond that. But you're not going to pick up on the first and third. You're just not going to see enough traffic to it, but you'll see it on the parallel. That's really the issue of the parallel paths there. That's where we'd like to start with, and then we can expand. If we're getting reasonable understanding that maybe we're pushing beyond that, those two parallel streets.
Commissioner Polgar, you have your hand up?
Spruce, not Grove. My bad.
Spruce.
Yes, that's a very important correction. And then actually mine is on the previous page. So maybe I'll let you, or sure, if we go back, it's either way. I didn't know if we're done with this one.
No,
we're almost done here. So let's just finish this.
Yeah, finish this.
If the traffic monitoring is done, we've already addressed making adjustments to condition C1 about drainage. This is the special case of the sidewalk and bulb out needs on that first block on the west side between Highway 1 and 3rd, which may have already been captured in one of these other earlier conditions, but we will make sure that we address this.
And one question about that one, is there, I meant to ask this earlier, but in that area, at some point in the future, not this project, but if there's some opportunity, because one of the things that Chair Gorn raised is that that continuity of Poplar as a gateway, and that there is that section, of course, that's Highway 1 to 3rd Avenue that's not like the others, right? In that kind of entrance part of it. At some point, it'd be great to retrofit that to DG, to a decomposed granite. I realize that's not part of this project, and I'm fine with this. I just wanted to throw that in there or have it on the record that that's something that would be desirable to seek out opportunity to do that, recognizing that I know there's utility issues and there's variety, and also there's the connection with the Caltrans crossing. But just it's in the future, it would be ideal if that could be also DG, have that kind of meander, pretty, to achieve what Commissioner Gorn was referencing. I was inspired by what he was saying, and I wanted to capture that.
Okay, good. And then we also already addressed traffic circles. So I think these 4 are discussed, and we'll go back up.
Can I, through the chair, is it all right if I go for?
No, go ahead. No,
Yeah, so
we're winding up.
Oh, great. And this is a minor thing, but I did hear in the comments about the DG path on the decomposed granite path on the south side of Poplar, on the west side where there are all the trees. I heard a lot of angst about the wanting to make sure that, because right now the way it's shown in the existing designs as going completely like a straight shot on the south side of the trees, the house side of the trees. And we've definitely clarified that it'll meander, but I think I heard a lot of angst about like they wanted to allow for it to meander on either side of the tree, depending, and I think that should be included because I heard a lot of angst about that. Just to acknowledge that the meander means it could be on the street side. It obviously depends, but that there's the opportunity to kind of react to the
street and or interior side, or with that. Yeah.
I just wanted to acknowledge that in there so that there's clarity, because the way the designs are right now, I know that's not what this is, obviously modifying that, but I wanted to address that anxiety that I've heard. And then there was one other question I had about okay. And then this using the softscape surface for parking lanes, is that just so that it accommodates like whatever you like? Not it's basically saying not using asphalt, but allows you to in the one about. Okay, great.
We would probably use some form of gravel of some kind or whatever, but we didn't want to just say gravel. And obviously there's existing landscaping that we've said why not retain if it makes sense to deal with that, and it's not really appropriate. So, and there may be another material that we should. So it was just a generic softscape permeable area, more permeable than AC. And certainly it would be a different texture and color and be that variance from the AC edge to that.
So we're adding a lot of things in. The meandering pathways issue, I think if you're going to put that in about being on either side of the trees, then we need to have something in there about safety, because that does sound unsafe to me, but I imagine there may be exceptions to that. But I think putting a path, on the street side of the tree could be really problematic. And if we have a resident pushing for that and it's not written in here, I would say safety is kind of paramount there.
And we would agree from a staff perspective that, when you don't have a curb and protection there, pushing that out there and encouraging that, it may not be the right thing at all in all conditions, but we understand it may be the only option in some circumstances. So we'll leave flexibility, but sure. For the record, we share that concern without having the protection from the automobiles that might be traveling in the lane very close to it. So this is going to be, what I can say is all of this is going to be worked out very quickly, because we're moving forward into, if this is approved tonight, we'll be working into 95% design quickly, and we'll be meeting out there and moving out there. So this is a quick fix.
And through the chair, I wasn't intending, like, actually that's, it is about maintaining safety. I would also point out a lot of the areas that are probably the biggest concern do actually have quite a bit of space on the street side. And that is where, it wouldn't be going out into the traffic, pushing people way out there. So I wouldn't expect that we'd want to do anything that would actually make it less safe. The point was not to create a hazard for pedestrians and
If we're going to
bicyclists.
put it in the record, I wanted to include it.
Yeah, no, I wasn't suggesting it as a, like, let's put people in unsafe positions.
No one was assuming that.
Oops.
So I recall that we talked about the courtyard being used as the staging area. It sounded like if there were material that you needed local, you could have it on the street rather than somewhere else. Did I hear you right, John? Moz?
So the courtyard would be the primary major laydown area for materials and larger things, and then we would look at daily and for the most part daily storage within the right of way again as necessary. Yes, that's the plan.
I'd like to be sure we have a condition describing where the staging area is, because that's been such a source of mischief in this town for years. Thank you.
While Jill is writing that, I had a question just in terms of, I appreciated, Maz, you mentioned that you are essentially, like, you have your phone number and people can schedule appointments. Is that like, is there a plan now that you're moving into the 95% drawings? I think I thought I heard you say, John, that you're going to be out there, like, looking at things, talking to people. Is that your plan, to kind of go out there and talk to people or reach out to landowners or property owners, or is it, what's the kind of process for engaging folks?
There's definitely a couple of conflict points that we will reach out directly to the property owners to discuss the concerns. Actually, while we've been talking, I've gotten a couple of emails from folks on Poplar requesting to meet with us. So we're starting to schedule that out as we speak. If any neighbors out there, talk to any of you guys, just please let them know that we're available to talk to them. And again, we'll reach out to the ones that have a little bit more of a critical issue with the pathway and the trees, specifically there, to talk to them directly. So that'll be, we'll do that in the next couple of weeks.
I think we're ready for a motion.
Sarah, it's your swan song.
Oh, well, I moved to approve the motion, but with the additional conditions of approval as documented here. Is there any other, just to make clear, did Jimmy, you seemed fine, like we're all good? We captured everything?
It seemed to catch my notes. So yeah, I think I'm okay. B19 was the kind of look into was a little vague, but I think we've nailed down the details, so I'm okay with it now.
All right, then that's the motion.
I'll second that.
Roll call,
Okay.
please.
Commissioner Polgar,
Yes.
Commissioner Reddick. Oh, sorry. It's too late. It's too late in the night. I'm sorry. I didn't mark my little thing. Commissioner Benjamin.
Yeah, you can't be baiting Steve. Yes.
And Chair Gorin.
Yes, definitely.
Motion approved, 3-0.
Wow. For such a contentious issue, thank you guys for being so flexible. It was really good. That was wonderful. We don't have a director's report. If anybody on the commission has anything to add before we leave.
I will just want to say thanks again to Sarah. We talked about it briefly at the last meeting, but you will be sorely missed. And I hope you'll come kibitz at our meetings regularly. And if you ever decide you want to come back, we'll lobby for you. So
I think
I may be in bed. I thank you.
I think was a good phrase.
What's this?
I said setting the bar. What Chairman, Vice Chair Hernandez? Setting the bar, setting a high bar was a really apt phrase.
Thank you. You're very kind. And I will miss working with you all, but I will be honest. I often, my head kind of turns into a pumpkin by 8 p.m. So you can look for written comments, but I very much appreciate all of the, working with all of you and also all of the wonderful staff support. So it's been an honor to serve. And so thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All right.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Everyone.
We are adjourned.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.